Hi class, today we're going to begin reading The Last Egret by Harvey E. Oyer III. The author is a descendant from one of the barefoot mailmen who traveled Florida bringing mail across the state of Florida. The important thing about this book is not only the story, but the information we learn about Florida. We have a map of Florida. This is the top of Florida. And then we can see the bottom of Florida. This will help us understand the area we're talking about. So over here we have the Gulf of Mexico, and then the Atlantic Ocean. Everglades is in this area here, and this will help us when we refer back as we learn about the areas that they're exploring in this book. Chapter 1, 2 pounds of grits. I was walking on the wild end of Hippaluxo Island, where we lived, when I thought I saw the ghost. Papa sent me for a load of firewood, so I had set out just after lunch toward the north end of the island for a large fallen tree that I knew was dry and would burn strong. I had my saw slung over my shoulder, along with a sturdy piece of burlap to drag home the wood I collected. While I walked, I watched the trees by the water to see if I could spot any blackbirds that sometimes roosted with their wings spread out to dry. They always reminded me of preachers, with their black robes and arms spread out against the sky. That's when I saw a flash of light through the trees, and I suddenly remembered Tiger telling me about the spirits that the Seminoles said lived in the forest. I didn't know what a spirit looked like, and I didn't want to find out. So I jumped off the trail and hid behind a thick slash pine. My eyes were glued to the trail up ahead where I'd seen the white shape moving in the trees. I tried telling myself that it was a real person, but I knew it wasn't true. Uncle Will had moved away the year before, up to Sand Point, and my parents had sent my little sister Lily up north to a boarding school for girls. There weren't any people on the island except for me, Mama, and Papa, and those two were back at the house, where Papa was patching the roof yet again, and Mama was tending to her blueberries in the garden. Mama swore that this was the year she was going to get blueberries in South Florida, no matter how many people told her that blueberries don't grow in South Florida because it gets too warm and there's no winter. Every time someone told her this, she would just smile and say that was between her and God. Hiding between the trees, I strained my eyes, and I tried not to be too scared. After all, I was old enough that Papa took me out to hunt wild boar and had taught me how to use a sharp axe to clear land myself. Ha! The shout came from directly behind me. I jumped in fright and yelled as I whirled around, the saw and the burlap flying out of my hands. Then I jumped in surprise. Lily was standing there, not 5 feet away, with a big grin on her face. What are you doing here? I finally sputtered out. She had somehow crept up right behind me without so much as a whisper of sound. The only other person I knew who could do that was Tiger, but he was a Seminole, so it hardly counted. Lily did a little curtsy and ducked her head. Nice to see you too, Mr. Charlie Pierce. Then I got mad. I'm serious, Lily, I said. You're supposed to be up at school. Are you on holiday? Lily grinned. Do I look like I'm on holiday? In fact, she did not. Lily was wearing boys' pants, which always drove Mama crazy, and a long-sleeved shirt. Her clothes were filthy, as if she'd just been sleeping in a coal bin for a month, and her face was streaked with dirt. She had her hair woven into thick braids, and it looked as if she had tied it with a strip of bark she'd ripped off a tree. In all, I thought she looked more like a wild animal than my little sister. No, I finally said, you don't look like you're on holiday. Then a new thought occurred to me. You didn't run away from school, did you? Because if you did... But I stopped talking because I could tell from Lily's grin that was exactly what she had done. Then her grin slipped a little, and she looked worried. I hated that school, Charlie. I told Papa that he might be able to make me go, but he couldn't make me stay. What was so bad about the school? I asked. Mama said it's the best girls' school in Florida. Lily snorted. Maybe as long as you like to needlepoint, sing from a hymnal, and dress in ribbons and patent leather shoes. I laughed in spite of myself. Lily was the last person on earth I could imagine dressed in ribbons and patent leather shoes, and if you gave her a needle, she'd be more likely to bend it into a fish hook than attach it to thread. You wouldn't believe it, Lily continued. We had one whole class where they made us walk with books balanced on our head, 'cause they said that you would turn us into young ladies of distinction. Lily stopped and spit impressively into the trees. So much for young ladies of distinction. I shook my head. But I still don't get it. How'd you get home? Did Uncle Will go pick you up? No, Lily said indignantly. I walked. Now I was really shocked. It had taken Papa 2 weeks to get Lily the 250 miles north to Paltaka, where the school was located. It was a complicated trip because Papa and Lily had to sail up Lake Worth, travel through the woods to the Jupiter Inlet, go north up the Indian River on Captain Brevard's steamboat, and then north up the St. Johns River to Palataka. You walked? I repeated, stunned. Sure, said Lily, looking pretty smug. It was no big deal. Look at this. She pulled out a bundle from her shirt and untied it. It was filled with grits. I nicked this from the school kitchen on the way out. 2 pounds of grits. I figured that's how much I'd need to eat on the way back. But I didn't even need any of it at all. So what'd you eat? I asked. Charlie, she said, if you paid even a little attention, you wouldn't have to ask me that question. You can live off the land here in Florida your whole life. You'd never have to buy another piece of food or drink of water. You just gotta know where to look. I'll admit it, I was impressed. I didn't know anybody else who could make it 250 miles through the wilds of Florida on foot, except maybe Tiger. There's no way I would have tried such a foolish thing. But here was my little sister who had done it all by herself with food to spare. So you think Papa will be mad? Lily asked, looking anxiously past me, down the trail and back toward our house. Are you kidding? I said. He's going to flip his hat over this. The truth was, Papa had been looking distracted and worried lately. Something was bothering my parents, but they couldn't say what it was. This wasn't going to help. Well, I'm not going back to school, Lily said, her face hardening, no matter what. I sighed. The firewood didn't matter anymore. There was going to be plenty of fireworks around the house tonight without striking any flint. Come on, Lily, I said. We'd better head back to the house. But just before I turned to leave, she grabbed my hand, and I could see how worried she was. That was just like Lily. She could be as stubborn as an ox, but she hated letting people down or hurting anything. She had the biggest heart of almost anyone I knew, no matter how tough she acted on the outside. You understand, don't you, Charlie? She asked. You're not mad at me, right? I shook my head. No, I said. I understand. Now let's just hope Mama and Papa feel the same way. But I was pretty sure they wouldn't.